So yeah, I really want to thank you once again for doing this, and for maintaining your desire to do that, despite it took some time to arrange that. But I'm honestly, I was very much looking forward to this conversation because I've been wanting to speak specifically with you for probably a number of years now. I got introduced to your music from a YouTube channel that was very popular back in the day, Brian Starr's channel, you know.
Yep.
And since that time, and this is really not exaggeration of any sort, I've been, listening to Between the Roses specifically, and your music in general, probably um, every week since then. And I've always been very fascinated with your artistic approach and your very distinguished style when it comes to, when it comes to expressing yourself, expressing your emotion, expressing your perceptions on the world through music. So I've always wanted to pick your brain and just understand
Yep.
more about you as a personality and how you develop this approach towards again laying out your views to the world through music and through art. So yeah, it would be great if you can just walk me through and tell me how did you develop this connection to music and art in the first place, I guess?
Well, first of all, thank you. I appreciate all that, man. That means a lot. Dude, it's interesting because it's something that I guess I never really I didn't think about too much. I never was thinking about like, oh, this is how I'll approach music and
Mm-hmm.
art or whatever. But I mean, I kind of first found music when I was younger, like going into high school, I got my first guitar and just wrote a song one night and
Mm-hmm.
I think what happened was I just was able to kind of express something that I never could, but in words. I've always been kind of an introverted person, like not
Mm-hmm.
outgoing, not really able to, talk to people that well.
Mm-hmm.
So I started to kind of realize I could use music to do that, but it was also just really healing for myself to just write these songs and then, just understand more
Mm-hmm.
like what I was going through or whatever. And I don't know if that makes any sense, but that's kind of how it's always been. Like it's never really changed.
Mm-hmm.
And just to see people starting to connect with that stuff, like it was kind of surprising because I always wrote about, hard stuff that I was going through or
Mm-hmm.
sadness or whatever. Um, but it was really cool, man, like to see so many people connect to it and then like just be able to relate to people. And that kind of pushed me to continue to do that and to try to stay vulnerable through my
Mm-hmm.
songs. And
Mm-hmm.
the less I think about it, I think the more I'm able to do that. And as start a career and you start doing these other things, it's really easy to start listening to what other people say and kind of lose sight of that.
Mm-hmm.
But anytime I've done that, it's just kind of felt like, well, what's the point? Then
Mm-hmm.
if I'm not just saying what I want to say, and that's kind of what I kept doing, really, man. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes you don't know what to say or you don't have anything to say.
Yeah.
But I try to just capture the moments when I do have something to say or inspiration hits or whatever, and just do it, just flow with it and try not to think about it too much. So I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah.
Uh, it makes the perfect sense to me. And, specifically what really dragged me to your music and what personally impressed me is that, as you said, you've always touched on difficult themes, deep, profound topics for people, from a personal perspective. And what really fascinated me was that, um, despite that, your music always had a sense of, I guess, tranquility and, calmness to itself, which really struck with me because obviously the topic that you've mentioned, and I'm specifically referring again, maybe to songs that I've connected with from Between the Roses, that of Anastasia and the song of Sparrow and so on, which are these very deep and profound songs that at the same time had this sort of even uplifting feel to them, at least to me. So I'm very curious to hear, you know, what's the emotional dynamic when you're thinking about these topics, when you're expressing them to your music. Like, I'm really interested to hear what's your perception on them, so you manage to deliver them in such a rich way.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. I think looking back on it, it's a lot of my music. I guess the way I would describe it is really I'm just using those songs as kind of a vessel to convey an emotion. It's like
Mm-hmm.
something you can't put into words, but you have to
Mm-hmm.
find a way to kind of. So I think a lot of times when I'm writing those and, singing them and recording them, I'm kind of focusing on the subtext of what it means, like I'm imagining and feeling those things.
Mm-hmm.
So it's almost in a way like the words don't necessarily matter as much,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm just always trying to kind of get that emotion across. And a lot of times it's kind of just been this like sense of, just, I don't know, just like loss or longing and just like one kind of wondering like what
Mm-hmm.
happens after death and
Mm-hmm.
the sense, because through life, we meet people, we connect with people, and that's one of the strongest things we can feel. And then like losing that, even if, if it's a person or anything, a change in your life, like that's a very like deep feeling. So I think a lot of it has come from that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I've always just kind of, developed a perspective that you just have to kind of keep going. You just
Yeah.
don't know what's around the corner. And, maybe that's a bit of a coping mechanism, but I've always tried to, I guess, appreciate the harder parts of life
Mm-hmm.
and, realize that the good parts can't be there without those, hard moments and going through
Mm-hmm.
that kind of stuff. So yeah. And the art of Anastasia specifically was something that I actually had a dream about that song, like those lyrics. And
Mm-hmm.
so I feel like I've always kind of tapped into that like dreamy state,
Yes.
but I feel like
Yeah.
that's, just kind of a spiritual state too, like meditative state,
Mm-hmm.
and that's been a big part. And I can't really make music and stuff without that, if that makes sense. So
Yeah,
yeah.
definitely. So, like, do you remember, like, the first time you've experienced this sort of spiritual experience that helped you to create a song? Like, what was it like for you, if you obviously have a memory of it?
Yeah, man, it's hard to think back. I haven't thought
Yeah.
about this stuff for so long, but
Yeah.
I think I think it was maybe Between the Roses probably was the first album where I just like really felt that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think the whole process of how that album happened, it was pretty crazy. Just all the synchronicities and everything. But
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I could tell you a specific kind of,
Yeah.
thing, but I think that album just wrote itself. Like I didn't really have to try. And I think I was just like, wow, like I just kind of have to follow that. And then like
Mm-hmm.
I think that album made me realize it's not really me writing
Mm-hmm.
stuff. It's not really me making this stuff, creating it. I'm just kind of like a vessel for that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, whereas before I didn't really have that perspective. I was still, making stuff, but yeah, man, that album was a very kind of spiritual experience, I guess, for me. And I recorded a full version of that album, which was 15 songs. And then the guy that I recorded with,
Mm-hmm.
something happened with his computer and we lost the whole thing.
Wow.
Um, which was interesting because I really wasn't happy with it. I just was like, this isn't right. So it was
Mm-hmm.
just this crazy synchronicity. And then I ended up meeting Caleb Dennison, who was the drummer for Never Shout Never,
Mm-hmm.
at a show, and got talking to him and flew down to Joplin and record that with him. And it was just, yeah, it was really cool. It was a really just kind of a follow your heart type of situation, and it worked out. So
Yeah,
yeah,
it makes, everything that you're explaining makes great sense, because um the dreamy spiritual part that you're referring to is exactly how I am perceiving the music as well.
yeah,
It's so different and distinguishable from everything else. So everything that you're saying makes describes everything perfectly. You've mentioned something very interesting that I'll be interested to explore as well. You've mentioned that you almost feel as a vessel that is just expressing the emotion that you're receiving in a certain way. Can you talk a bit more about that, because it's such an interesting concept. It sounds as a very is a very genuine representation of what art is. So
Yeah.
even if it's about expressing this process for you as an emotion or whatever the case might be, I'd love to hear how would you describe this?
Yeah, man. No, it's an interesting thing to talk about, and
Mm-hmm.
trying to think of how I can explain it properly. But I guess,
Yeah.
like throughout my life, like, just besides music, like as a human, it's like anytime you try to control things and you try to like do everything on your own and figure it out, like I've found you just end up in bad places, and things just, I guess, kind of when you let your ego, like just our minds and our
Mm-hmm.
thinking that, we know everything, when you let that kind of run your life, it's just, I struggled a lot through my life with just like alcohol and drinking and stuff like that. And I got sober about 4 years ago, and I learned a lot through that process too. And I guess I realized like it's all kind of tied in,
Mm-hmm.
with music and everything too. But I guess, I've also started like, I've kind of transitioned over to filmmaking,
Mm-hmm.
and it's been interesting because it's like the same experience as with music, where you show up and you trust that it's going to work out if you just put your whole heart into
Mm-hmm.
it, and you don't know how things are going to work out. It's the same within a studio, I don't know how these songs are going to turn out right, but I think it's just kind of something you can't explain. You just got to trust it, and I don't know
Mm-hmm.
what it is, if it's, God, the universe, whatever you want to call it, but
Mm-hmm.
I just know I can't do it on my own. And there's been times when I've tried that, and I've failed, and it's something I don't really understand, but
Yeah.
it seems to be kind of a universal thing where you just have something that you believe you just really want to express, or it's like that thing needs to be expressed.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're willing to be the one to kind of, step up and do that, then things just kind of fall into place. And
Mm-hmm.
even just writing a song, you just, like every song I've written, I would say like it's always been the same, where the chorus lyric or theme or
Mm-hmm.
melody will just pop in, and I write
Oh,
everything around that central theme.
yeah.
Whereas if I sit down, I'm just like, oh, I'm gonna write a cool song today. It just, I don't
Doesn't
know. It
work.
just doesn't work. I mean, you can do it, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's pretty interesting, man. So
That's so amazing, to hear all of this from your perspective. Um, did it did it take time for you to get used to being open to these sort of influences and putting yourself in a situation where you can represent them in the best possible manner, or did you need some time to adjust and maybe make yourself more um, you know, open and perceptible to them?
yeah, no, it's a good question. I think when I was younger, when I was first starting,
Mm-hmm.
um, I get introduced into like meditation and the law of
Mm-hmm.
attraction, all that stuff. And I was super into it. And I was just like always meditating, visualizing, and just really just tapping in,
Mm-hmm.
and people have different views on that stuff. But for me, it was helping, visualizing my goal was like playing Warp Tour was something I every night
Mm-hmm.
visualized. And then, I got
Wow.
to do it eventually, but it's like, it got harder as I got older to kind of stay connected to that, because things just happen in your life and
Mm-hmm.
you get hardened a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like I got pretty disconnected from that part of myself for a long time, and I've just kind of recently started to like find that again
Mm-hmm.
a little bit. So yeah, I think like maybe it does take work to stay in that spot, but it's hard because you just want to be comfortable and do what's easiest in the moment or whatever, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah, dude, I don't know if that, hopefully what I'm saying makes sense. I haven't done one of these in a while, but
No, it makes perfect sense. And in the end of the day, the instinctive answers are the best ones, because
yeah,
as you've said, like, these are not things that most of the time words can express and describe properly. So obviously it's very difficult to pinpoint the different parts in the most accurate way. But um, for me personally, everything that you're mentioning makes all the sense, because I can, at least connect to what you're saying in a certain way, you know.
yep.